Ice Spice, Tokischa, Thootie. Let's talk about it. How y'all doing? Welcome to Let's Talk About It Music Reviews Season 11. How y'all doing? Welcome to the show. Guys, we got a new episode for you today. And this one actually was pretty interesting. I saw this drop, once it was, Friday, night music. And honestly, I didn't think about checking out this song. And then a couple of days later, this shows up once again on like the news section of Twitter. So I'm looking at that already. I'm going, alright, so that means this shit's probably trending. Then I go back to the music video, go back to the damn song, and this shit's like number 5 on trending on YouTube. So here we are. We're talking about Ice Spice once again. Lord goddamn mighty. The last time I talked about Ice Spice was when she did that SpongeBob song, which, that was definitely a fucking song. Maybe I'd rather put a gun to my head than listen to Ice Spice fucking rap about SpongeBob. But, hey, we're in the big 2025. I'm out here in the freezing ass cold weather, and we might as well talk about this goddamn song. We actually got a feature on this too. It's not just Ice Spice. We got Ice Spice. We got some rapper named Tokischa, which I've never heard in my damn life. I'm just going to be real with y'all. Now, apparently this is some kind of Dominican, kind of Spanish type artist, and then the beat's kind of like on those vibes too. So there is a little bit of a, international kind of vibe throughout this whole entire song, which, hey, some of my biggest reviews in 2025 have been international reviews, so I'm not really complaining. Now, let's get into it, starting off with the beat. Now, first of all, when we talk about this beat, I do think this is a pretty good beat. Going from that fucking SpongeBob song with that, like, bare bones trap beat that just sound absolutely ass to listen to, absolutely had no value when I'm listening to the song. And then you go to this song, which actually has some really fun drums on it, some really nice hi-hat sounds too, some really good like clap sounds going crazy on here. And there's some moments too, this beat's got a kind of a club feel to it. It kind of can easily get stuck in your head and actually add a lot of value when you're listening to that. And I overall really do enjoy this club sound. It sounds really good. It's not the typical drill Ice Spice sound. And I think that's one of the big takeaways from this song alone. You have a beat that actually has something to it, actually's got, something going for it. And I think this beat absolutely does it. I like the Dominican sounds on here. I like the international vibes going crazy on here. And then you got a beat that's got some cool background vocals that's got that, chanty type, vibe in the background, which you can hear, which is pretty fire in my opinion. So you have all of those elements really working well for you. And then we get into the song. So let's get into the damn song. The beat's not everything, but I would say this is one of the top tier Ice Spice beats because, usually, and in my opinion, guys, I've been covering Ice Spice since she dropped that song about taking a shit. So I've been, checking out all kinds of Ice Spice music throughout this whole entire podcast show. So I've been covering all kinds of Ice Spice music when she made that fart song, when she made that, taking a shit song. I've been through the whole ringer. So going from this song right here is pretty good in my opinion. Going from this beat already, I'm just like, damn, this shit's already fucking step up. So that's one of the cool things about this song is that you actually get a little bit of a difference in the beat. You actually get a really fun kind of gets you into the song, kind of intriguing type of beat to really get you going. So I overall really do enjoy that. Now let's get into Ice Spice. Now let's talk about the hook because the hook is one of the main parts of this song. Now, I really do think this hook is the typical Ice Spice hook. That's the one thing I will say about this song. This is the typical Ice Spice hook. You got that starting flow that she always does, and then you got that catchphrase. There's always a little bit of a catchphrase, ending off her hooks. So you have that same hook style that's being used on this beat. But I think the way it's done, I think with the cool background vocals and everything that's really happening with this song, you actually have moments where, the flow of the hook is actually pretty good. It's not really, bringing down the song. And honestly, if this hook does get stuck in your head, I think it does do a pretty good job of doing that. But other than that, I would say this is the typical Ice Spice hook. But one of the main standouts of this song is definitely Tokischa. I've never heard of this artist in my life, never heard of her. And then she comes in here and just, I would say, completely kills it. There's actually a couple of flow switches in her verse, which sounds pretty goddamn fire. I do like the moments where she's going from English to kind of Spanish, and you have those moments there, which sound pretty goddamn fire. And overall, I really do enjoy this verse. I think this verse definitely does get the job done. It's a nice feature verse. Could easily get stuck in your head here. I like the faster flows that she's got on here. So, you start out, with the typical Ice Spice hook and all that shit, which sounds pretty good, pretty alright. And then you move on to this verse, which actually has some rapping to it, actually goes really hard on this type of beat. And I'm like, oh shit, this is pretty fucking fire in my opinion. So that's a pretty cool thing. I'd say overall, Tokischa pretty much killed her verse, had a nice verse. And then we get into Ice Spice, which was one of the main standouts of this track, which I'm pretty surprised to say. Usually Ice Spice verses compel of the hook. The hook sounds like the verses. Let's just be goddamn real. She does the same flow. She's like the baby. You do the same flow over and over and over again. But this one actually was a little bit of a shakeup. A little bit of a difference here, in my opinion. You actually have Ice Spice coming on here, actually having a really good flow. I like the starting flow. I like these little mini flow switches that she's doing, which I'm surprised that she's doing. And also we have a moment too where Ice Spice is kind of switching it up, kind of, rapping Spanish, which is pretty cool. So you definitely got that going for her. You got that kind of Spanish undertone that she kind of switches to and then switches back. And I do like how she does switch to a more faster flow. So we get a lot of different flow switches from Ice Spice, which is pretty cool in my opinion. So overall, guys, when we talk about this song, we talk about Ice Spice, Tokischa, Thootie. Overall, I would say this is one of the more better beats off the Ice Spice catalog. If you're wanting a really nice, engaging beat that can get stuck in your head, you're going to have a good time hearing this goddamn beat. It goes fucking hard in my opinion. Then you have a really nice hook from Ice Spice. The flow is pretty good in my opinion. Tokischa comes in here with a pretty good verse. And then Ice Spice, honestly, in my opinion, overall finishes with a nice verse too. Even gets some Spanish shit going on, which is pretty cool. So overall, guys, when we talk about this song, I'd say this is one of the better Ice Spice songs that I've checked out on this show. So I'm easily going to give it a 7 out of 10. So 7 out of 10, guys. What y'all think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I don't know. Let me know. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcast at, make sure you follow, turn on notifications, guys. We're dropping new content every single day. And I'll see y'all later. You have a good one. Yeah, guys.